somewhat creates a U.S. conversation, right? Because so many of the rules and the laws are specific. But when we're having the conversation we're having, that there's some universality to that, right? That's why him in Switzerland got something from that, right?
Exactly. And that's what a great TED Talk does anyway. It's inclusive, no matter how old you are, no matter where you live, no matter what you do, that you kind of can take something from it. So like a college student can watch this and be like, oh, okay. Like they can, even if it's just to bookmark it in their head for the future, you know, it starts to plant seeds. And I think that's why this is going to be a hugely precious talk on many levels, and most of all, of course, for you and your business, but also far beyond that, I would say. And that's why, so what we're kind of wanting to do today is to kind of extract everything that we had mapped out in these talking points that I resent to you, kind of journey through them with you verbally so that you can add some meat to the bones for all of these different points, so that we can really capture these essentials in your voice. As a next step, we'll have that professionally transcribed. I will send you that transcript. It'll be anywhere between 8 to 10,000 words usually. Just read it to see if we captured everything you wanted to say, or if something came across in a way that you didn't intend, let us know. And once we have you sign off our transcript, then we're going to move in from our side into the scripting phase and start to get your first draft together.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Let's do it. Awesome. So do you happen to have this in front of you?
I can pull it up and I can have it kind of beside us. One thing I do want to mention is one of the things that came up as kind of a tagline of the rebranding was a concept we've talked about, that retirement by design idea.
Yes.
So I think it would be good if somewhere, whether it's in the concluding or whatever, say something about that phrase.
Yes.
The good news is you can build a retirement by design, but to me, it's the creator of that design has to be you. And I hope today we shared some ideas that help you, something like that. But I think us getting that phrase in there will be very congruent with us using that almost as a tagline for the business too.
Do you have a current tagline, by the way?
Well, for a long time, the last several years, I've just gone, it's the same name as my podcast. It's Rich Life Advisors, the retirement resource. That was kind of the tagline. The lady helping me with kind of the rebranding, she strongly likes retirement by design as more of a tagline slogan.
I like that too. And it's funny you say that, because we even put that as one of the core concepts up here. So I was going to have you
I remember us having that conversation.
Pull that out, because I like that, because it sounds kind of, snazzy, has a nice ring to it. Retirement by design, it kind of like feeds into the Apple school of thought. It feels fresh, it feels modern,
right.
And at the same time also people can understand what that means. It means kind of there's something to be designed.
Well, there's a component of responsibility to it, right?
Yes.
It has to be designed, and somebody will design it for you, but it might not have your best interest in mind.
Yeah,
right?
It's not designed for you. And in this sense, the key to design it for your life, not a catalog life of some older person. Like, it has to be designed with your needs in mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the scary side is it could be designed by somebody that has very different interests, and it might not be your best interest in mind, right?
Yep. That's also, of course, not
because that's what people are scared of, that, right? They're scared of being taken advantage of, and especially in my industry, it's almost like I found out there's a really fine line where I tell people a lot about all the things that my industry fails at, right? But I stand in a space to where it's like I'm on your side. I get it. I see it. And we can do better. Yeah.
So you're kind of like almost putting the heart back in the retirement business, where most of them just put in the calculator.
Right. And I think a lot of people, they just, a lot of advisors, they kind of shy away from those things about people being scared of being taken advantage of. Well, I know what you're thinking. Let's just talk about it. Yep. And I get it. Right. And, but you can do better. And I believe there's going to be a group of, I believe there already is to an extent, but I believe we can grow a group of people that can do better.
Yeah, I love that.
Because they're understanding this model.
Yeah. Yeah, actually that's a perfect opening for us, kind of to start noting this down for us.
Okay.
And we can start kind of with what is wrong with that industry, what is wrong with that broken model. So just for our person who's doing the transcript, this is Elena.
I'm Beau Henderson.
Hey, so here we go. We're gonna start our interview. So, Beau, tell me a little bit about what's going on in your industry and what you see as going wrong in the retirement industry at the moment.
Sure. What I see with the retirement industry, one, it's a very slow moving industry, and it's an industry that was really built on product sales and bottom line, and bottom line, and I get that model, and I get for-profit business, right? I mean, people don't do this for free, for charity, for the most part, but it's not really built in a way that's truly serving the consumer in the best way possible. And what I mean by that is, the longer I've been blessed to be doing this work since I was in my early 20s, and I've had a lot of years. I've had over 20 years now of working with people much older than I am. I'm getting closer every year to the age of my clients, but what I've learned and I've seen is that there's a lot more to defining a successful retirement. So from an industry perspective, it might be defined as if you have enough assets to create enough more income than your expenses in retirement. That could be how simple the definition is of a successful retirement. But the reality is, we're people, we're humans, we're unique. We all have different variables, different relationships, different personalities, different behavioral styles, different goals. And that leads to, it's much more complex than just a mathematical formula, more income than expenses, right? So then we need to start looking at what is maybe we change what the definition of a successful retirement means. And again, it's much more human, on a human level, meaning a successful retirement is one that's actually satisfying. It needs to be meaningful. It needs to be fulfilling. And where that really became clear to me is, I've seen multiple people now that had plenty of money. I call them miserable multimillionaires. They got more than enough money to successfully handle retirement in that context, but they're miserable. They're lonely. They're isolated. Their most important relationships aren't there. So money does not equal success in this equation, but I think the world would kind of sell us that, or the industry would tell us that. It's like we talked about. It's like that we look in a magazine and you see the beautiful white-haired couple on the yacht without a care in the world. That's, I think, what the industry would lead us to believe retirement's like, as long as you have enough money. But there's a lot more to it than that. And what we see by these conversations not being talked about as people are planning and transitioning into retirement, that's when we get into a lot of those darker conversations we've had. We call the dark side of retirement, the spikes in alcoholism, depression, highest suicide rate among men 65 plus. Right?
It's more men than women, right? It's
yeah. A lot of that, I believe, is they're leaving a career and they don't have their meaning anymore, and sense of who they are, their sense of identity. Gray divorce, the divorce in retirement. So all those things, we could be having conversations that window when we're thinking about transitioning from work into retirement, in addition to talking about, how do I turn my savings into retirement income? How do I protect myself from a estate planning perspective? How do I have the right tax plan? All that needs to be done. I'm not discounting that at all, but we should add to those conversations. How do I transition? What am I doing to transition so that my relationships are intact and healthy, or I have a plan to create new relationships? What am I doing to make sure I have an idea, or at least a game plan to experiment with my first year of retirement? I have some idea, so I just don't wake up one day and don't know what in the world to do. And before you know it, depression sets in. So I think a lot of the message is, why is it not more? I believe it will be, but I believe it will be, say 5 years down the road, 5 to 10 years down the road. I believe this will be part, because the consumer is really demanding that we start addressing these things, because they're so real and they're wondering what happened. Why did this fall apart? But why don't we start now? Why don't we start having these conversations now in our planning, and spend some time addressing, what does a successful retirement look like to me? Financially, yes, absolutely, but let's include what makes it meaningful, what makes it satisfying. Lo and behold, what might make it fun, right? What might make it exciting? What might make me look forward to this part of my life? And if we'll do that work, then we can really start seeing the transition go smoother for people to living a retirement that's not full of surprises and pitfalls and catches them off guard with a lot of these negative things we've been seeing.
Because basically what you're saying is right, that people get sold on almost this illusion that they see in these beautiful brochures of these cruise ships where, an elderly couple sails into the sunset, or sitting on a pier. And it, as you said, it almost always is just about getting your finances in order. And it leaves out a huge other picture. A, the picture of that there's way more to it than money. And B, also that it didn't factor in any of the problems that can come with age. Like you said, the
Right.
illness, the depression, the loneliness, one spouse dies before the other, all of these things, right? There's nothing in there to kind of
Right.
that.
Right. You look at those ads and you'd think, okay, that couple has a perfect life, not a worry in the world. Their kids are perfect. Their grandkids have never had any issues. And, it's just unrealistic way. It's just an unrealistic image.
Yes.
Not that we can't have great, memorable experiences, which is a big component of all of what we're talking about, but we also need to be real too.
Yes. And can you maybe speak about what do you see, like from the side of retirees? How are they right now? They're going about it. Would you say maybe more in a way that they just feel they need to get an advisor, need to take the advice on money, and then it's like they can dust their fingers and say, "That's me done"? Or is there also a part of the retiree that's at fault here?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the message here in this talk is, there's a component. We talked about this concept of retirement by design. The exciting news is you can craft it. You don't need to come into an advisor's office, and then they're not going to understand how to craft your life that's meaningful and exciting to you. They can maybe help you talk through it. That's why I'm so big on the retirement coaching model, so that you have somebody with the skills to actually help coach those non-financial aspects of retirement in that transition period. But no, so I think the piece of retirement by design, I said that the exciting part is you can make it what you want it to be. The downside maybe, or the hard part, is it's your responsibility, right? There's a responsibility component to it. So what I'm seeing now that's a call to action for this consumer, or I guess a better word is this demographic, is when I ask a group of people, and I've done this with thousands of people now, do you have a retirement strategy? And if so, do you understand it? And are you confident in it? And it's less than 5% of people that will actually say they have a written retirement strategy. They've actually done the work to even have a strategy. And that's not even, that's just a financial strategy, right? Let alone have the conversations to talk about, how do I define retirement success? What does that look like? And starting to work through some of the exercises to help give us an idea of that. So I think one of the first problems we have is people not dealing with it. Most people in this country are, we'll just say most people in general, because I believe it's pretty much universal. They're heading towards retirement, and they've accumulated probably some pieces here, some savings there, maybe some insurance, and they're heading towards retirement, hoping everything turns out okay. Right? That's their plan. I hope everything turns out okay, and then they're caught off guard when life throws us something that we weren't expecting, but life always will. Right? So I think that's the first component is people starts with we can design our own retirement. And it's not for an advisor, for a neighbor, for a coworker to tell you what that means, what's successful, what's for you. And there's ways to help define that, because a lot of people don't know, right? You ask them what it looks like, it's like a deer in the headlights. I don't know anything but working my career for 40 years. So sometimes it's really fun to see light bulbs go off as you're talking to somebody through that process. What might be an exciting next step? And you don't have to plan 30 years. Let's plan 1 year. Let's try that out, you know? So I think the first call to action is don't depend on anybody to do this for you. Now, people can help you. You can build a team, and we can talk about some clues of building a team. Do they understand what retirement coaching is? If you ask them about these non-financial aspects of a successful retirement, do they look at you like you're crazy? If they do, they might not be the right fit. They might not have the skills to help you with this.
Yes.
And what you might be risking is, all those things we talked about, the things that truly make you happy. So I think I don't mean to drag on that component, but I think the first thing is there's a problem. People aren't planning and preparing for retirement in the first place.
Yes.
Right. Two, the good news is we're giving them some information to how to go about it. Mm-hmm. We might even have 5 things, ask this, 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 and this. And of course, one of the components of what we want them to ask is, what do you do to help me transition into the non-financial aspects of a successful retirement? Right? I mean, I think we give them that, because the only people that are going to be able to answer that question is somebody that's been trained, well, mostly is trained in some kind of retirement coaching deal. Now, I say mainly is because there's some advisors out there that are naturally coaches. They just don't know to use it to differentiate themselves. They ask good questions, they listen, and there's some people that are naturally good at that. So some people are actually coaches and don't even know it.
Yeah, coaches without the title, but they
right. So there's some, and they're not utilizing it to be the differentiator. That's what they do unique. But so I think that's it. There's a call to action. You need to find the right team. Right? You need to find the right person or people to help you create this plan. And I think the other piece is the transition's important. Don't be the person that retires at 65 years old and then says, I'll start planning it tomorrow.
Yeah.
The best work we can do is that 5 to 10 years leading up to retirement. Mm-hmm. Right? So I think that's kind of what I'm seeing is a lack of, on the two sides, right? On the lack of the demographic that we're talking about serving, they're not being proactive and taking the responsibility, realizing I'm responsible for my retirement success. From an industry perspective, they're not doing a good job equipping people for what retirement success really means and looks like. And again, I just referenced that again. We can create a perfect financial plan and retirement still be a failure, right? I think that's an important concept. I can help somebody create a perfect mathematical financial plan to never run out of money and be in good shape, and retirement still fail. Yeah. And that sounds counterintuitive to people, but it means, what if you have all the money in the world, but your relationships are gone, your marriage fails, you're depressed, your health is shot? Then we didn't prepare you for a successful retirement. We prepared you for a mathematical equation that gives you enough money. There's a difference.
And it's true. And on the flip side of that also, you can't have a successful retirement without a financial plan either.
Right. Well, I think that's an important part. That's always been the most challenging part, is that's a crucial component that's necessary, but it's incomplete. Right.
Yes. It's like step 1 almost, right? It's like,
right.
You need to have that part to make sure that the other parts of the more lifestyle oriented parts, that they can even, happen.
Right.
You need that.
Well, they work. Yeah, and they work together, meaning you're right, that they're both essential, meaning, but the clearer we get on what the exciting, meaningful life looks like, the more context we have for what we're trying to build financially.
Right. Yes.
Right? So they're kind of back and forth, but I think they're linked, but I think it is important that we do make sure that that's communicated, because you always run the risk of it's all the non-financial stuff. That's what makes things good, but it's not, right? I mean, you have to be able to pay for it, right? I mean, there's a reality. We have to be able to, because because we could have the greatest ideas in the world, but without a plan, that's another trap.
Yeah, then
Right.
and then we're back in the catalog dreamland.
Right.
We'll end up
Right.
looking at the catalog instead of being on the boat ourselves. Right.
Right. So yeah, I think that and it's rarer to be that way because most people don't do the financial planning in the first place. But that's the other side of it. The flip side of it is we could have perfect clarity on what would be meaningful and fulfilling and exciting to us. But if we don't take responsibility to address the financial component, like you said, it's just none of. If we're in scarcity because we can't pay our electricity bill, that dream has, there's not much reality to it.
Yeah, we never can do that safari in Africa or whatever if
Right.
we can't keep the lights on at home, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I do think there's some way we just want to say, hey, we're not. This is crucial, but where we have failed this demographic is that it's not complete. Right. The financial component is crucial, but it's not complete. It's kind of like, it really is like a yin and a yang. I mean, it's like two pieces that make because all those things I named, the 5 components, why I made it 5 and the non-financial is just 1. It's just because in the retirement planning, those 5 are what people know.
Yeah.
And I'm adding my 6. It's really more 2 to me. It's more that whole strategy and then the non-financial.
Yeah, but I think like for a TED Talk, it's easier to keep it as two blocks because then
I think it should be. Yeah. I'm just saying for the financial planning firm, it gives me 5 more things to talk through.
Exactly.
About
And
the process.
the dynamics that we want to communicate to people is that basically the financial part and the lifestyle part, they're like a marriage. They go hand in hand. They have to go hand in hand for it to be successful.
Right.
Yep. They need to cooperate to get people to that retirement that they want to have. It has to be A, financially well thought out, and B, you need to know what it is you want from that part of your life, and you need to ask yourself those right questions to get into the correct kind of mindset for that.
And I think that visually to me, or the picture that's painted, is almost like we talked about, is that example of, hey, we can have all the money in the world, but if our relationships aren't there, the health is shot, we're depressed and lonely, it wasn't a success. On this hand, we can have all the clarity. We could be one of those people that's very aware and knows exactly what life would look like, but they fail to address this part. It's going to fail. And then, like you said, really the symbiotic whatever nature we're looking for is when you get these 2 pieces together. And to date, the industry hasn't done that.
Yeah. They look at the financial and say, that's our lot. The rest is basically up to you. Good luck.
Right. And I think we can even mention you're starting to see an emerging field of retirement coaching in which people are starting to be able to learn and attain skills to have these conversations. And people are paying for. I think one of the stories I had was a teacher. She was so nervous about leaving her 40-year career that she hired me for a year to just help her. She wanted to work on a year to just help her build out her first semester of retirement. Because she thought in semesters as a teacher, and that was it. She's like, if I can feel like I have a plan or have something, because she was scared to death of losing her routine, waking up, being lonely, and had a lot of fear around it. So she, to the extent she said, I want to pay you for the next year until I retire to help me. Nothing financial in this situation because in her, and I don't know that we have to tell that part, but in her situation, she had a really big pension from 40 years of teaching at a high income. So the pension covered all of her financial needs for retirement. There's more pension than expenses. So our entire work mainly has been 90% the non-financial. So, but I think what I think is important about that story, she saw me talking about non-financial aspects on a news clip that I did in Atlanta, and she actually reached out to me about it. So what that told me is, if somebody just randomly that knows I really don't, that's really not, I rarely do just that. I usually do the whole component.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But the fact that somebody just called me up and said, will you help me with retirement coaching? That lets me know that there's a lot of people out there that if they heard the message, would be asking for it. Yeah.
For them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very true. Very true. And I think you're doing a great service for people to help them not fall into that dark hole, that retirement
Right.
that they might not be otherwise kind of prepared for. And maybe let's just address a little bit in your view that sometimes also retirees might have a bit of a quote unquote victim mindset where they actually do not believe that it's in their control because they think, you know, it's what happens, it's outside of them and it's dominated by the government or taxes or whatever, and that they are actually not agents of their retirement. Can you maybe speak
Right.
to that?
Yeah, and I think that's another issue is that most people are very passive and reactive when it comes to their retirement. And what you just hit on that, Elena, a good bit is I can't control tax law. I can't control the government. I can't control who's in office. So many of these things happen to me. Yet, which is true, there's a lot going on outside of our control, but that can't be an excuse not to control the things we can control, and that's working on our strategy. And even to the extent of I'm a big proponent. Don't just go trust somebody. Even though I'm a financial advisor, I don't want people just going and blindly trusting somebody just because they're a financial advisor. And I want them to I want them to be well enough equipped and have the vocabulary to ask the right questions to make sure it's a good fit to get them the results they're trying to receive. Right. That's why he said some of those questions about some of the questions, and I'm getting off of the non-financial. If they don't know how to help you in the U.S. optimize your Social Security claiming strategy, create a tax strategy, and have conversations about the non-financial aspects of retirement planning, they're probably just selling products. That's probably what they're doing. That's the extent of the planning. So I think the where we can equip, and I talk about raising your retirement quotient. I did a little assessment in a book I did. And it was R squared, right?
Yeah.
Your retirement readiness quotient, basically.
Yeah.
And what it is that it's up to you to take responsibility for getting this right.
So you're raising retirement literacy almost, right?
That's it. It's your retirement literacy. We've called it your retirement IQ.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whatever's catchy. Raise your retirement IQ, because it's right. You do want the best team possible around you, but if you're not learning and your team's not helping you learn, you're not learning on your own, and your team's not helping you learn, then how do you lead a team to support you if you don't have a base literacy of how to lead them to help you?
Yeah. You just have to go on trust, and that's dangerous at the best of times because
blind trust, and then you're vulnerable to what everybody's afraid of is being steered wrong. And sometimes people are steered wrong. It's not necessarily that the financial people are always doing nefarious things, right? It's sometimes if you don't know how to lead them and can't clearly articulate what you're wanting to accomplish, they might just not understand how to help you, or not understand the whole context. So that's why it's so important. I think that's the call to responsibility. Raise your retirement IQ, or however we want to phrase that. So I think there's failures on both sides, and I think that's important to point out. There's failures on the industry for only addressing a piece of the equation. Mm-hmm. There's a failure somewhere of how are we defining retirement success, mm-hmm. right? And I guess that's all of us. And then there's a failure on the demographic of moving towards retirement by passively and reactively addressing probably some of the most important. I mean, at least a third of their life. What's going to impact at least a third of their life decisions? No.
Yes.
And then how do we address that? We flip that. We learn what a complete model is. We learn how to redefine a successful retirement, and we equip ourselves to we equip ourselves to be able to create that retirement by design and lead a team to help us bring that to fruition, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like we're curators.
Right.
And we have to know enough about our subject matter to curate the right support, and to vet the support that's offered to us to make sure it suits us and where we want to go financially and from a lifestyle perspective.
Well, and I think the good news, bad news is I keep just thinking of the contrast. The good news is you can create this
Yes.
with some tools, with maybe some mind shifts. You can create this. The bad news is if you don't, nobody's going to do it for you.
Yeah.
And then you're that reactive, passive, almost borderlining that victim's a triggering word in some cases, but that's what happens. This happened to me, this happened to me, but what did you do to take responsibility to prevent it, right?
Yes. I think that's very, very important to help our viewers kind of understand this concept that fundamentally at the base of a successful retirement is empowerment.
Mm-hmm. And I could even see another um, contrast between retirement victor or victim, right?
Mm-hmm.
The difference is proactive versus reactive in a lot of ways.
Absolutely true. And I think you're actually guiding people into a better future by asking a provocative question like that. Is on which side do you want to be? Are you ready to invest in yourself, in your know-how,
Right.
in your team, in your future with time, energy, effort? Are you ready to invest into creating a successful retirement?
Right.
Which is, I think, a good question to ask. And it's basically based on the fundamental question I think that you're leading to, which kind of takes us to looking at this different model. If money isn't really what buys us happiness, because clearly in your experience working with so many people, it's clearly not the answer to a happy retirement just
Right.
by itself. So, what are some of the things that people should look at and include in the more lifestyle part of this equation?
Yeah. Well, and we talked about a lot of that. We're talking about, one of the things I used to do, and they're a little more personal development workshops. We would do kind of an exercise about if you kind of had a terminal diagnosis and had a year to live, what would you do, right? And it would always be, it would inevitably, and we'd do like a month, we'd shorten the time frame, but it inevitably revolve first around, I would spend time with the people I care about the most, right? And the point of that exercise that was always fascinating to me was, why do we let decades go by neglecting these relationships when we're saying right now that's the most important thing in the world to me, right? It's because we just, so I think a place to start is our relationships. And that's even the 10 investments for true wealth. I kind of named it an investment, but are we having a plan and intentionally creating and building these relationships, whether they're existing relationships or they could be new relationships. There was a fascinating study I heard at a conference in September. Lady's name was Zara Zeber, Zeber, and I could, if we wanted to question her about this, we could. But her whole topic, she's a PhD, is solo aging, and her research basically showed that success and not falling prey to the loneliness and the depression and everything, it had to do with your relationships. The fascinating thing in her work that she found, though, was that it didn't necessarily have to be your family relationships. It was just that you had created or put yourself around loving, supportive relationships. So it means it's not hopeless for the person who has no family. It's just you've got to intentionally create relationships in your life. So I thought that's always going to be a core fundamental thing is are we building a life? And that's some of the exercises, right? Who are the people you'd want to spend time with? Where would you want to do it? What would you want to do? And then you say, okay, how can I try to maybe coordinate those things intentionally? And I like to even break it down into the smallest component. How do we coordinate 4 of those things this year? You got to plan it, right? Or everybody's busy and things will come up. But so I think it's relationships. Another one that I found That's another big one's health. Right? Health is one of the biggest determinants of retirement satisfaction because it's hard to really enjoy retirement if you're miserable and can't walk or health is failing. So health is another one. Have you started thinking about how am I going to maintain my health as long as possible?
Mm-hmm.
And coming up with strategies and plans for that. And again, you could tie that up with, you could tie all these things, marry these things. So you said you want to maintain relationships with Mary and Jane from work once you retire. I don't know, maybe you guys go meet twice a week and walk. You marry things, right? You try to marry these healthy habits. Same thing with, like, we called it a list of curiosities. We say, what are things you've never done or might have done a long time ago that you've been curious or been thinking about doing? Might be taking piano lessons, might be writing a book, and just nothing's wrong. Just brainstorming those things and let's try them out. Let's experiment with them. And then the same thing, let's see, can we match up if it was to learn, I don't know, say it was to take painting lessons or dancing lessons. Are there friends that you could invite to do that with? So you're really trying to start marrying a lot of these things. So relationships, health. Another big one that I found is the memorable experiences, is intentionally creating memories, right? Because that's one of the things I learned very young, that was the disconnect from kind of what the world was selling me at the time about what was success in general. I was having these older clients telling me, hey, these memories that I've told you 10 times, every time I see you, I tell you the same story. I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. And they just get better. They're more meaningful to me the more I tell those stories. So I think
like wine, they get better with age.
Right. So I think memories, creating memorable experiences, because we all know that if you don't do things intentionally, we could all get busy and 10 years goes by and you miss the window.
You missed the boat on that. Yeah.
And then sometimes in that window we lose a person that's important to us. All right. Or, so I think the memorable experiences, the health, the relationships, those are big ones that are non-financial to me. And I think you kind of bake in there the activities and the experiences and I think that those big areas, because we only have time for so much, right? I think those big areas cover a lot.
Yeah, I
right?
think that's more than enough. And I think couched in the fact that before you get to that part where you live it, you plan for it, right? So before you say, okay, now I'm of that age, I'm going to now do this. It actually starts today, right? You already start building those relationships today. You already take care of your health today. These are like where the retirement plan is almost a life plan that you start at any age.
Right.
Really, because then the transition into that part of your life is so much smoother. If you already have your friends, then you can transition with them into this new phase. If you already take good care of your health, you can continue that. And if you haven't done these things, then, probably, I guess you would say today is the best day to start.
That's right. It's you're right. There's kind of a timeless component of it is even though we're talking about retirement, which is a transition event that makes us think about these things. This is really the broader rich life conversation, right? This is living a rich life whether you're 30 years old or 80.
Yeah.
It's really the same thing. We're just using a demographic in a transition that's very familiar to people and that makes them address this. And it's a difficult transition.
Yes.
Right. It's a little, but you're right. This same philosophy. There's no reason. I think that's the follow-up talk. We get this one out there and let this do good. Then we can broaden out to the rich life philosophy. Really, it's about living life well.
Yeah, living your life well, and then now in this case, it's living the kind of the last chapters of your life well, but really it's making the whole book a good book, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What is and to me, it's funny. I think what we're doing needs to be done because this demographic, they really need help. This model we're talking about, if we can help expedite it, it'll happen eventually. But if we can help expedite it and kind of be, hey, why not be kind of on the forefront of that conversation? But to me, it's the thing that's exciting to me is even the bigger application to it.
Bigger application, yeah. And I think we can maybe just, give a sentence or two just to kind of couch that in the bigger picture conversation. Of course, our focus here is on retirement, but just to make people aware, even if retirement is not around the corner for you, it doesn't mean that wouldn't be a great time to already start thinking in that kind of matrix.
Right. Well, that retirement by design concept, let's say this could be expanded to whatever age, and it's really life by design.
It's life by design. Yeah.
Right.
It's life by design that for this demographic ends up being retirement by design, because that's
right.
the
that's where they're shifting into
chapter. And also it's the first chapter, and this might be a good differentiator. It's the first chapter where a lot of social structures fall away from the outside.
Yeah, you're right.
And so that's why people crash land into this more, because they don't have the school timetable for their kids, the work 9 to 5, all these things that take up so much of our time and energy. And when they fall away, then you actually see all this space, and you're helping people actively create space in a positive way.
Yeah, no, and what's funny is as you were saying that, it made me think about there's another scenario, and again, I don't want to be too much this and the opposite of this, but there's another scenario I see where people retire, and because they didn't design it, they're miserable because they're doing everybody else. It's like they're babysitting full time now. That wasn't what makes them happy, but that's just what kind of people thought they'd do because you're not working anymore, and they get into other people's definitions and designs, and they wonder why they're unhappy. They're like, I should go back to work. I'm busier than I've ever been, and I'm not doing anything I want to do. I'd be better off going back to work.
Yeah,
that happens too.
That's true.
Then that comes into conversations about you. I'll have a lot of conversations, especially with women, about you're gonna have to put boundaries with your kids, because sometimes your kids will think retirement means you're 100% available for anything I need now.
Yeah, like, can you do me a favor and do X, Y, Z? Can you
right.
run errand?
Especially with childcare.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair point, that it's all about self-responsibility there too. And if you design your life, then you can also say, stop, this is not what I signed up for here.
It gives you some structure to, measure against what you have room for in your life. Exactly. Your life by design. Yeah, I think that's good.
That's a great additional point, I think. And also, we had kind of compared this old model and the new model. Also, like, if you're stuck in the old model, it's a little bit from this bird analogy. It's more the ostrich model, where you have your head stuck in the sand and you just hope for the best that nothing happens that you can see. And then the eagle, where you actually you have like a full view of everything, and you have clarity. And I think this is also what you just addressed in your last point, this clarity to know what your personal structures are, so that other people's demands get slotted around that, and they don't take up the real estate before you even go in there and say,
well, if it's not your design, whose design is it going to be? Because somebody's going to design something for you. It might not be the best thing. And the thing I like about our birds, if we use the birds, is the ostrich. That head in the sand just creates a visual of passivity and reactivity, right? It's basically not thinking about it. And that eagle could be more of a proactive. It's out scanning, looking ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
With its great vision, looking ahead.
Yeah.
Technically, it's hunting, but I don't know that fits. But yeah.
Yeah, it's we could say, instead of hunting, it's almost scouting for possibilities.
Right.
What's possible, what's out there. And I think that's the fun part.
That's good too, is because I think part of it, why people don't ever do this work, is they're so myopically focused on today, right? They never step back and think. That's what I was telling you earlier. When somebody else say, what would really excite you and be meaningful and fulfilling? Some people look at me like,
I don't know.
they're just like, I've never thought about that. I've just been a mom and an employee and a spouse, and I've never thought about what would make me really happy. It's because they're in this little bitty, just looking through their eyes, like you said, instead of stepping back and looking at a bigger picture.
Yeah, I like that. Small picture, big picture. And I think that's a big factor. And I actually wanted to ask you why, like from your personal journey, was there any reason or story that made you like choose this as your path?
Well, I think I've told you the story about my dad, right? That he passed
Tell me
away.
again.
Okay. Okay.
Unless
Okay.
you wouldn't want to
You're
use it unless you wouldn't want to use it in the talk.
you're prompting me. Yeah. So what happened? I was actually studying psychology, and I was going to start graduate school to be a psychologist. And a lot of that was I just enjoyed listening to people and helping them. That's always been kind of having that feeling of fulfillment that I was helping in some way. And during that period, my father passed away at 49 years old from lung cancer, and I went home to help my mom with a business he had and some real estate and just financial matters. And I really had to immerse myself in those things to help her with that. And I was young. I was 22 maybe at that time. And in immersing myself, two things came up. One, I realized that, wow, this is something that I enjoy, because it was like a puzzle piece. It was like puzzle to me. I really enjoyed this work, and I felt like I could really help people doing this. Right, same thing. And I'd already done enough in mental health that I saw hints of it being a burnout profession if I wasn't careful.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I said, okay, this is something I could do, and I could be good at. It would never be boring, and I could help people. The other side of it was I saw that if there's not people that are there to help people, 10 will show up to take advantage of them in transitions and situations like this. So that was the start of it. And then because my background was psychology, I got a job. My first job, I got a job at a bank for a couple of years because I needed some finance on my resume. And during that period of time, I was able to pick up another major in finance, and I was able from that point to transition into my first financial planning job, and been doing that for 18 years now. Right, and the retirement demographic specifically, the more I do this, the longer I do this, and the more experience I have, the more I just understand the conversations, the fears, the very unique things that people in this demographic face, and the conversations that they're thinking, the concerns they're thinking, and again, where our industry fails them. And that's where I feel like I've been able to put together something unique and special with Rich Life Advisors. And that just by having that kind of that front row seat now with over 3,000 clients that I've had conversations with, is I just kind of have an understanding of them. That and there's kind of an empathy for that, but then there's also, I have the other side of the financial planning side, where I've learned that business too, and it's just how do we make that match up to what this demographic really needs, because it's a very unique. It's not like any other time. If I'm 40 years old and I make a misstep, I probably have time to recover. But if we start making missteps and decisions that we can only make once, and you're 60 years old, 55, 60 years old, we might not recover before you need to start taking income. So it's a very different, very sensitive period financially to get right. But that's just the first hurdle, like we talked about. We got to also make sure, are we building that plan by design that you're looking forward to I don't know. Nothing's more exciting than to me than to see somebody excited about their life. That's right. And if we've helped create some clarity to help that, there's some of these stories we talked about somebody saying, hey, this was a dream, this is something I gave up, and maybe just giving a little nudge and then seeing them bring it back into their life, or seeing them take that dream trip that they were scared to take, but you were able to help them say, you can actually afford this. And let's don't wait 5 years, because who knows what could happen in the next 5 years. Let's go ahead and do it if you can afford to do it. Because the longer I do it too, I've seen a lot of bad things happen. Somebody retire one day and a month later, they're diagnosed with a terminal illness.
Yeah.
Things outside of our control can happen. So I think that's why the underlying message of designing that life and making sure it's not this destination. We're one day we're gonna put our stake in the sand and say, I have accomplished a successful retirement. It's that we create a journey that's successful. We're living in a way that's successful, right?
Making
So
every day count in that.
right. So that if it lasts 5 years or if it lasts 40 years, we did what we would do if we were in that scenario like we talked about, where we look back and had a month to live. We're living that way the whole time, whether it was 5 years or 30 years.
Yeah. So it's not, retirement is then not really about having a not necessarily like a 40-year plan, but having a plan that you can live every day. And if it's
Right.
fantastic. If it's 40 days, then you whichever way it goes, you put as much life into it as you can.
Right, and it's flexible. That's the thing. You're not making 40-year decisions. Let's maybe map out a year that you're excited about and let's experiment.
Yeah, and let's experiment. And that's actually a great thing. And for example, can you maybe share a story about somebody who started a business or like a whole different like life identity?
Yeah, I didn't get the one that I referenced in the sheet, because I still would need to pull up her interview I did, and I still might get that to you. But I did have another story that I thought of. So I had a guy that retired from the military. And the problem sometimes I run into when people retire from the military, they can get in their years and still be very young, right? I mean, because they can get in 20, 30 years and still be 40, 50 years old and they retire from the military. And plus, it's a different life, right? Military is very structured, very routine. And this guy, his name was Randy, and we could use his name if we needed to. He's a good friend and client now, but it was a different transition, because you go from almost too much structure, like that's how you live your life, to now you have complete freedom. But one of the things he was able to do was he took a passion for cars, and he got a huge sense of accomplishment from detailing cars, like making them look perfect, basically making them look new. The funny thing was, I had to get onto him a few times. I was like, man, you can't charge $200 and spend 30 hours on a car, because he's just so precise. But I've watched him over the last 3 or 4 years, and now he's grown it into a nice business that's kind of his retirement income. But it's something that gives him, there's stress relief there. There's a feeling of accomplishment when he does it to that detail level. He feels like there's a tangible result, right? It's something he loves. And he's been able to recreate structure around his business like he was used to in the military. So it's something as much as him finding something he loved in the cars and the detailing cars, which he did on his own anyway, and turning it into a business that, one, it helps him because his age, he retired young. It gets given the family a little more income, to help the long life expectancy. But again, it's given him that it's also, hey, there's identity there. I'm a business owner. There's purpose there. There's accomplishment. And he's able to do this. He does this from home. So he's around his 2 daughters. They're young still, and be able to spend more time with them. So he was able to start a business, do something he loves. So he kind of was able to do a lot of things, accomplish a lot of things in that one thing of starting a car detailing business.
Very nice. Do you want to maybe share a story about a nurse who turned into a musician? Also, maybe relating a bit to that you shouldn't wait to make it happen.
Yeah. So that's a good one. And here's a reference point. If you or your friend still has a copy of the book, she's in a chapter of the book. So I'll tell the story, but if you wanted to reiterate that, it might have been more current when I wrote that book, because it's been a while now. But so this is Nancy Swan, is her name, and she was a classically trained violinist. Okay, and I met her at a hospital. She's also a nurse, and I met her at a hospital, and she was working in the hospital as a nurse. But one of the things, she would always get so excited talking to me about music, and I said, "Hey, I'd love to hear you play. Let me know." She'd play some things out in town when they'd have little festivals and things, and one of the things she shared with me, she kept talking, and she tried to keep that as part of her life the best she could, but she was really busy in her career as a nurse. But one of the things I thought was really cool that she did, and she's now retired, but she didn't wait till she retired to let her music have a bigger role. She actually went through a lot of the steps and paperwork to get a music therapy program approved in her hospital. So she would go into like the different units and play for patients. And I remember her telling me, and I think the note she played, I think I had it in the book. I'm wanting to say it was an A note or something, but she had a case where she played it was either once or twice, but she played a certain note and it actually woke somebody up from a coma, the vibration of her music therapy. So it was really cool. She went through, now there's a music therapy program in this hospital system that wasn't there before, and she was getting to both combine her career and her love of music.
And that, of course, also is something she can then continue, even if she
Right.
kind of leaves.
Right. And, well, she'll have even more time for it now that she's retired.
Yeah.
But I think a cool thing there, she didn't just do, a lot of people say, I'll pick up painting, I'll pick up my music when I retire. Is she found meaningful, fulfilling ways and helpful ways, right, to utilize it and combine, not see her work as what was cool with her is the work wasn't the conflict to me doing my music. She said, she found a way to merge them.
Yeah.
You know, so that was a real cool story. And there's you know what's cool? I've got a really good picture of her with her violin, if we wanted to pop it up on the screen.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to make a note of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was Nancy's story. I had another, let me see if I have, was there another one you wanted to?
We had Leslie Cuban and a boat trip for a couple.
So Leslie Cuban, that's the one, that was an interview I did. I told you.
That's the other lady. Okay.
That was another business story.
Boat trip.
So the boat trip, I'm trying to remember what that boat trip was about.
I think if I remember correctly, it was about, could have been the couple you referenced that they didn't know they had the money for the trip, but then they actually realized they did.
Okay. I was thinking that was it, but it wasn't a boat trip. It was just it was a flight. I mean, it was a trip. This was a trip to, I think I did share the story with you, though. This was a trip to Ireland. This is like a dream trip to Ireland. And here's the cool thing too. I've got a picture of me at their dining room table where they're showing me the pictures after they went on the trip. Which was really the cool part of that. So Doug and Dorothy Butler, she actually called me this morning. That's funny. They wanted to take this trip to Ireland. They'd both retired, but they were really concerned that they couldn't afford to do it, and were really scared to take out too much money. But we sat down and we looked at everything, and we figured out what it cost. We're like, you know what, you can afford to do this. And still with a little hesitation, they did, because that's a big fear of people. People have a fear of running out of money. That's probably the biggest fear. They did the trip. They came back, and it was just, like I said, it was just so amazing. They were so excited, showing me all the pictures of all the things they saw. And then this is a part I don't know that I can share. I might have to get permission, but
we can share some of the details of
I mean, yeah, the trip we can. The thing that I don't know is that Doug, her husband, since he was in the Marines, and 40 years after leaving, raised his family, had kids, PTSD showed up when he retired.
Wow.
Yeah, it was suppressed for his whole life, and then like waking up with nightmares and all this stuff. So all that to say is they were able to take that trip, and so last I heard he's doing a lot better, but you just never know what's going to show up or come up. I guess that's the point.
Okay.
but that was a real fun story of them. They weren't going to go, but they made sure they could afford to go. Now, what's the pivot? If they couldn't afford to go, what I would recommend is let's work on an experience we can have that would still be meaningful that we can afford.
Yeah.
Because that's the other side of the thing. I mean, hey, we might not can all take a trip to Paris, which might be a dream trip, but I promise we can make time once a month to take our grandkids to the park.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really it's more about being intentional than the magnitude of it. Right? It's great if you can do the dream trip, but don't let that be an excuse not to create experiences.
And that's a great point. And maybe even sometimes extract what you want from an experience and see if the essence of that is something you could get. For example,
right.
I know a girlfriend of mine was desperate to go to Argentina and she couldn't, and she wanted to learn tango there. And that's why she wanted to go, and she didn't have the money. And so she didn't do anything. I said, why don't you take tango lessons here? You know,
right. Make sure you even like it.
You know, like you can start this right now. You know, and I think these things are just mindset shifts to see.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be one or not one or the other, or everything or nothing. It can just be
it can be both and, or it could be but I think a lot of times we do that. We'll use it as an excuse. Well, I can't do that really great thing with my spouse, so I'll just wait till we can, and then you lose 5-10 years of you could have. And most people, I think, if I were to say this, because it's very true for me, my strongest, most powerful, meaningful memories, they're rarely like grand gestures, or it's usually somebody that cared about you spending time with you. It's rarely like a big gift or a fancy trip, right? It's usually something you'd never think would be the most meaningful thing. So I think if you get people to think about that for themselves, maybe they can think about it externally too, about, hey, maybe I can give that. Maybe I have been thinking about it wrong.
Yes, I love that. I think that's a really great point. And I think that takes us nicely to kind of like the 3 mindset shifts we want people to undergo. And the 3 mindset shifts are reinvention, opportunity, and growth mindset. So maybe we can start with the first mindset shift that we invite people as they kind of journey into this new model and this new phase of their life with a different mindset, of course, is what to you does the reinvention mindset mean?
Yeah, I think as we go through that, I envision a picture of Madonna behind me in different phases of her career, right? And we talk about what would Madonna have to do with retirement? As she is an expert at reinventing herself, right? She's had a how many decade career because she's been able to reinvent herself over and over again. Probably pushing 50 years, 40 years at least. And maybe we should be more like Madonna in retirement, or maybe that's what if I told you need to be more like Madonna in retirement? You know, kind of a joke, and maybe show one of the more provocative pictures first, and then explain that, right? And say that's what we have the opportunity to do. And my teacher story might have a place here, and that's all we're doing is we're trying to reinvent her from being a principal of 40 years in a school to who is she going to be that first semester of retirement. And then we can expand that to the first year. And it can be exciting. It can also be very scary. But the cool thing about reinvention, it goes back to our retirement by design. You can decide who you get to be.
Yeah, you can decide which Madonna album you're going to live up.
That's right. Do you want to be like a virgin? Do you want to be, whatever? You show different things. Yeah.
Whichever Madonna you want to be, you can be.
That's right.
You get to be in charge of your own mixtape.
But remember, and I don't know where this fits exactly. I think that's important. If you don't do that, if it's not your design, like we said, somebody will have a plan for you, but it might not be your plan.
Yeah.
Again, it's not like your kids aren't. If they're thinking about you babysitting full time for them, they're not probably being mean or anything, or they're just thinking, unless you tell them, hey, here's my plan. Here's what I want for myself.
And they might even think they're doing you a favor, so you're not.
They might think, yeah, I'll keep her from being lonely, give her something to do.
So it's unless you clarify that you're gonna rock your own album.
Right.
You know, people might not be aware that they're maybe not doing you a favor by telling you that you're a full-time childcare person now or whatever it is, right?
Right. And then the opera singer, this is another one. I had another lady that I met. What was her name? It'll come to me. I'll figure it out. But she was devastated when I met her. She had raised a son, been married, worked in another person that worked in the healthcare system, and her son had just left for college, which was kind of her world. Her husband decided to leave her at that point. So all of a sudden, everything that she was for, again, the last 30, 40 years was gone one day. And every once in a while, I'd call and check on her and just check in, see how are things going, because she was really struggling, really depressed, still working. But I was really happy for her when Debbie, her name was Debbie. I was really happy for her one day when I saw at a local restaurant. I saw that she was actually singing, doing the music at a couple of local restaurants around town. And when I asked her about it, I found out she used to be a singer, and it was something that through decades of her role as a mom, an employee, and a spouse, just got buried, and she kind of lost it. And for the first time in a long time, I heard joy in her voice of her explaining to me how she's out doing that again and recaptured that love of music. And so another example. I know we got a lot of like artistic examples.
That's fine.
But it was really cool that to see some excitement, happiness, and hope, because she kind of found something that she lost.
Yeah.
Through her role. So she reinvented herself as something she was a long time ago but lost. So that's something you could do, right? There could be something you were really passionate about that you just gave up.
Yeah.
That you bring back. So maybe that's a good example of that.
Yeah, like reinvention can also be resurrection.
Right.
Yeah, very, very good. And then the second one we wanted to look at is kind of the opportunity mindset, and maybe we can talk a bit about what that means, and also the example of this lady that worked with, I think, India.
The opportunity mindset, I think that's just being open to new things, being open to opportunities in retirement, because again, it's hard to look forward to things if you feel if you get there with, this is all life is, what I know. It can be exciting if we're open to what if there are new things. It could be scary, but it could also, beyond that fear, is also maybe excitement, maybe a lot of good things, right? So I think if we approach retirement about what kind of opportunities are out there for me now, and that's where we see examples of people, it might be getting called back into a consulting opportunity. Mm-hmm. That they might have stopped their career, but they still can get a piece of that meaning and what they love by consulting, feeling, there's something to be said for feeling valued, feeling needed, right? So be open to opportunities, be open to, like I talked about with Doug and Dorothy, if there's something we could run the numbers, maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't, but be open to that trip to Ireland. That was a dream. Be open. Could it possibly be reality? What opportunity are there? Opportunities for me to volunteer that would be fulfilling and meaningful. And I think the opportunity is just to be open to opportunities and be. I think there might be a little bit of this too, is be willing to push the edge of your comfort zone, mm-hmm. because that's where you're going to find the opportunity in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. That's also part of like the eagle, right? The eagle goes out there, mm-hmm. and sees opportunity.
Right. That's right. Our ostrich, guess what you're going to see? Some dirt, maybe some worms.
Yeah, exactly. You won't get a big picture vision of what's possible for you.
Right. And the India woman, so this lady's name is Vicky. I have to just Vicky for now. I have to give you your last name.
Well, Vicky, anyway, you'd only want first names in a TED Talk.
Yeah. And there's a chapter, she's in the book too. So it's Vicky Moore is her name. And she runs a nonprofit called Rahab's Rope. And her story was, and again, you might want to, if you have the PDF of my book or something, you might want to just refresh on that. But I'm going to tell you because I wrote that in 2010. So some of it might not be spot on. But I remember she was a stay-at-home mom. Vicky was a stay-at-home mom. And this was early on in the days of the internet. And she looked up and saw some statistics about the issues with human trafficking. And she tells the story as she remembers feeling like, wow, I really, that touches me. I'd really like to do something about it, but there's nothing I can do. I'm just a stay-at-home mom. And that was where the story started. And then through just some actions, being open to opportunities, that's a perfect example. She now, and I could probably get you an update, but as of when I wrote that, she now has 2 or 3 centers in India that go in and rescue women out of brothels and things and bring them in, give them jobs, help them raise their kids. They have stores here in the U.S. that sell their goods and impacting hundreds and hundreds of lives.
Wonderful.
So this mom that saw this thing that said, there's nothing I can do, I'm just a stay-at-home mom, is literally changed. Probably the impact, I would say, thousands of lives at this point. Because you think of the impact on the kids and everything else.
Everyone, yeah.
So, yeah. So that was a good story of being open to opportunity, and now that's her mission. That's her life's mission. That's her work. That's her impact. And she's this stay-at-home mom is changing the world, changing lives, right? So that might be, if we want more specifics, I could probably even get her on like a 10-minute call and just get updates from her and record it if we wanted to, because it's a really cool story. Now, I don't want to shortchange it, but that's the gist of what I remember.
Okay, great.
And she's here local, so I could.
I think it's always interesting if you wanted to see, just maybe we can bring another angle to that story, because I think it's a very powerful one, because there are many people who think I'm just a whatever it is, employee, stay-at-home mom, blah, blah, blah. Right. I cannot do this. And again, this kind of links in even to the bigger picture of, you can start doing this now. You don't need to wait till retirement to see what you can do. Right. I like that a lot. Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to growth mindset, what is that for you? Like, what would be?
So yeah, curiosity, learning, growth mindset. I think the key here, I think the curiosity is an important word, because we can explore things we're curious about as a starting point for making retirement. It can be a series of experiments to see what we love, even if it accomplishes us learning things we don't like. That's good too, right? So I think, and curiosity gives us a lot of clues on things to try when we're trying to say, hey, what does that first semester look like? Let's start with some things you've been curious about. If it's learning a language, if it's taking those tango lessons, let's start there, because let's explore those curiosities. So I think that's an important word. I think the growth mindset, and these could all be almost the same word, but just slightly different. The growth mindset is just being open to, you're not done, right? You're not like capped at, I've learned everything I'm going to learn. Now I'm just going to live in the box I've built. Yeah. I can continue to grow. I can continue to. If we use our eagle metaphor, I can continue to explore new lands. I mean, I'm not capped by much of anything. Right?
It's not game over; it's game on.
Right. I think that's a good one. It's being open to growth. It's starting a class, taking a class. Explore. I love it when I see somebody retire and they say, "We're going to." I have a couple. This might be a. I don't know where this is. This might be more curiosity, but could be growth. They are going to visit all the national parks in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they're just systematically going state by state, and they're going to do that over the next several years. And so I don't know where that fits exactly, but it's something they've never been able to do, and now they're doing, and they're it's just things they've never seen and never done.
Like your bucket list, right? So basically,
Yeah.
you're saying, it can be like your bucket list. What do you want to put there in that?
Right.
And do you even have one?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. And
so we talked about the teacher a few times.
The teacher, we can reference back the campus store. I don't think we will even need that, because I think we can put the teacher from Earth.
And I don't even remember what that was. Oh, I think that was, we talked since I was at a conference, and the University of Notre Dame and a few other campuses, they're actually creating programs where they bring people back with a lot of life experience and various backgrounds, and actually they come back on campus for a couple of semesters. So they have a college experience, but it's like in retirement.
But as students, not as teachers.
As students, as students, yeah. So it's kind of a cool thing. I don't know that we might be trying to squeeze too much in there, but I'll definitely interview them about some of those programs at some point.
I mean, I think it's great that they're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's a fully immersive. They're in classes with 20-year-olds.
How great is that?
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Pretty cool.
They have the inverse program here, actually, where students go live in old people's homes.
Oh, yeah? Huh.
Yeah. And they have like college dorms next to like old people's homes.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
So I think the exchange of young and old together works actually very well.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that movement is the diversity and experience these people bring into the classrooms. Yep. and into the, they get involved in the campus activities, that it's part of, hey, they're getting the experience, but it's also they're sharing all the value they bring. Right?
They bring value, which maybe in our society is a bit undervalued, how much they can actually bring.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very, very important point. And it's even, I think many people have in mind the movie, I think it's even called The Bucket List, with Morgan Freeman and Jack
Nicholson.
Yeah. And that kind of movie showed also, it was also kind of a, it was obviously a bucket list movie. What can you do? And at the end of that movie, what came out was that relationships matter the most.
Right.
Yep. You can have the fanciest experiences, but at the end of the day, you want relationships.
Right. It's true. That's why it's always the first thing when we talk about what are those non-financial. It's usually and the first thing with that kind of that death sentence exercise, right? It's always relationships that come up. Always is.
Yeah, that's that. I guess even if you drilled it down, like we had here, if you had to design your favorite day, it would probably start off with who you want to spend that day with.
Right.
Then the activities. First, you probably start with the people.
Well, I think that was a key point too, is start matching those things up. If you answer questions like, who are the people you'd want to do things with? What would you want to do? Where would you want to be? And then start saying, are there ways I can start combining some of those things?
Yeah, the A plus B plus C. Yeah.
Or what are some of those curiosities you'd like to explore, like dance lessons? Are the ways I could start combining some of those things? I think that's a really, really
I think that's a beautiful
exercise.
That's a beautiful tip, actually. I like that. And if we move into our conclusions, you wanted to maybe briefly touch on a bit why having this kind of more holistic plan also helps you have some bounce back from curveballs that life might present.
Yeah, I think, well, I think this was almost a fourth mindset initially, is this flexibility mindset.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that I think a key, if we're too rigid in retirement, and this is what I found with retirement planning for 20 years now, when we're dealing with life and we're dealing with human beings, you have to be flexible. It's never going to play out like a spreadsheet. It's never going to be linear. And if we're too rigid in our plans and our ideas of what should happen or what we're setting ourselves up for failure. So I think the idea of being flexible is going to set us up for a much more successful outcome, because we can adjust, we can assess, we can learn, we can pivot, right? We don't like something. What's the lesson there? We can adjust. It's not a failure. It's a course correction, right? There was a story somebody called into my radio show I loved, and he was referencing motorboats and sailboats. Did I ever tell you that story?
No.
He said in a motorboat, he said it's fascinating. With a motorboat, you have the motor and you can go to point A to point B in a straight line. You just point and the motor drives you in a straight line. He said that the thing about sailing is when you're tacking, he said it's thousands of miniature corrections while you're heading towards your destination, right? Mm-hmm. So you're constantly making little adjustments. It's not a straight line. And I always thought that was a really good metaphor for life, right? We're heading in a direction, but we're constantly getting feedback. Is there a lesson there? Let's adjust. But we've at least got enough clarity. We're going in a direction.
Where you're going. And I think,
right.
Like maybe even where people misunderstand what having a plan means, they might think, that means it's set in stone, but really that's not at all what it is about. It's getting the big principles right, and then have that flexibility to adjust.
Yeah. And there's nothing that says you can't change your plan. Right. We just want something that we just want to make sure we have something that we're moving toward.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So I don't know. So the flexibility mindset, I almost think that's like one of our other mindsets, right?
Yeah. I was thinking we can maybe move that up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think if you keep the mindset of curiosity, flexibility, opportunity, and reinvention, I think we can nail those as.
Yeah. We'll have those 4 mindset. We'll start with the reinvention, then opportunity, then growth mindset / curiosity, and then flexibility mindset. I think that's great. And then kind of drawing it back into our conclusions. Here we want to we touched on this already, but like making people feel that they're the leaders of their retirement.
Mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that raise your retirement literacy, I think it's this can be as strong a call to action as we choose for it to be. It's really don't be a victim, right? If we wanted to, if that's not too triggering in a bad way, don't be a retirement victim. Too many people are. Yeah. Be proactive, be the leader, because nobody's going to do this for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We've shared some guidelines and some things, but ultimately, and you can find some great team members if they're the right team members to help you in this journey, but you've got to be the leader in this.
Yeah.
The days of passively approaching retirement, that's where all the horror stories come from that we hear. It's people letting things happen to them instead of them proactively addressing that. And that's one of the things I say when anybody comes. I'm doing a workshop. I'll do 3 this week on Social Security strategies. And I sincerely mean this. I'll tell the people, say, kudos for you to coming out here, because if you're not out there reading books, if you're not out there coming to learn, nobody's going to call you up and help you say, hey, you're actually entitled to more money from this benefit. Nobody's going to do that. It's you coming out, knowing the rules, being responsible for it, that's going to make the difference in your family receiving as much money as they possibly can. So I think that's the thing, is that's just kind of a kudos to those of you that will take the stand, take responsibility, and not be a retirement victim.
That's exactly right. And you know what it almost makes me think is that it relates to the retiree to be the ostrich or the eagle, and almost the retirement system and the industry can be a raven if you're not careful. because it can kind of steal your gold. I don't know if you have this, or it's a crow or raven. I don't know which of the two that steals steals your everything that's shiny. I don't know. You know which the
I'm
black?
not sure. I'd have to look it out.
I
For
think
sure.
it's the raven. That anything that shines, they will steal. They can steal rings. They can steal gold. They will steal from you or take things of you.
Or it could even be. No, I was going real dark. I was going to say it could even be that semi truck coming down the road. If you're the ostrich with your head in the sand, it could just plow you over, right?
Plows you over, yeah.
Not to get too complicated. I'm afraid if we introduce three birds, it might be too confusing.
Could be, definitely.
I don't know.
But I think like from the energetics behind it is that the ostrich relates more to the retiree, and the industry is still on another, like there are two dimensions to the broken model, right? We have the healthy side and the unhealthy side, and we have the retiree, and we have the retirement industry, right? We have.
I see it. I totally see that, and there's two things I thought of that I think are good little nuggets. Is that the ostrich, with the attempt to protect itself, that's why it buries its head. It's actually ensuring that it's going to hurt itself, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of funny. That's kind of the paradox of the ostrich, right? It's trying to protect itself burying its head, but that's the exact thing that hurts it. But I see what you're saying. So the ostrich is down in the earth with its head in the sand. The eagle's up here, and maybe the industry somewhere in the middle, and it depends on which perspective you're looking at it, whether it helps you or hurts you.
Yeah.
Right. With the tools we've shared and with the knowledge of the eagle, maybe you can work, maybe it can help you now that you know the right questions to ask, the right thing.
Yeah, because
the ostrich is just going to be clueless.
Correct. Because you're basically, the system doesn't play you, you play the system.
Right. Are you
and you're not even playing the system, you just are aware of the system. Like you said, those social security people, they just get what they're due. They understand the system. They take the time. They learn.
Right. They're navigating the system as opposed to being navigated or something, or being taken. So I like that. So I don't know what the metaphor is, but I like that is the ostrich is in the earth, the eagle's in the air.
Yeah.
In the middle is the industry.
In the middle is the industry, and it can go both ways, also which advisors you pick and everything. But I think the core message that I like also that we kind of weaved out last time is that as a retiree, if you are upping your literacy, if you are becoming a leader of your retirement, you also become an early adopter for a different way of navigating the industry. And you don't need to wait for the retirement industry to change for you to seek out people that work for you, that can answer your questions, that make you feel like they understand what you want from your life and your finances.
Right. Well, you can utilize the industry as a tool as opposed to a solution, maybe, because it's up to you. As long as you're waiting on the industry to do this, the conflicts and So I think
what's
that's
great about this is it doesn't leave anyone defeatist, which is really important. And talk that everybody feels like it's not like, oh my God, this industry is so bad, I'm going to get crushed. You know, it's about the contrary, to say no, you don't need to get crushed at all. The more you wake up, the more you're going to thrive.
The industry has harmed reactive, passive people. It can be a great tool for proactive people that lead their retirement, right? So it's a perspective. Again, it depends on where you want to be looking, because you're right. You never want to say, well, hopefully that it straightens itself out in 5 or 10 years. And
by the time I'm old, they will have this part of their package.
Right. Have it fixed. And my hope is it is easier. There's an easier access point for more people to have that. But the reality is,
it's still on you, though, even if that were the case, right?
Yeah. You still have to lead it. You kind of got to be the captain of your ship or pilot of your plane, whatever. Very good. What else we have?
And then, so we already touched on the fact that if you do find a retirement advisor and they look at you like crazy, if you talk about the more lifestyle part, That's a red flag to pay attention
Right.
to.
Right.
And to,
Well, and I think somewhere in there mentioning, hey, I believe in the next 5 to 10 years, people telling you they have a retirement coach is going to be just as normal as you telling me you have a trainer at the gym. It's going to be normal, but a good clue to see if you have somebody that kind of gets this and understands this model is to ask your advisor, what is the plan for your health, relationships, your non-financial aspects of retirement, and how does that fit into your financial plan, or how does your financial plan address that? And if they look at you like you got a third eyeball or whatever, you
yes,
might need
time to run.
that's right, you might need to reassess that relationship.
Yeah, very cool. And kind of for us to close out, we wanted to kind of do a big eagle style zoom out and talk a bit about that successful retirement leaves a legacy, and that might be more than leaving wealth. You know, it's
Right. So a legacy, a lot of times with legacy, we think of estate planning and wealth distribution, which is great. If that works out and that's your goal, that's great. But think about the legacy of a life well lived, the legacy of a retirement well lived, the legacy of your heirs seeing you spend time with the people most important, creating memories with those people, doing impactful work that's fulfilling to you. Think about that legacy you leave behind, because those are the things that are going to make the biggest stamp on your kids and grandkids and impact who they grow up to be, or what they aspire to be in the future. So let's not just think about let's redefine legacy while we're on this topic of redefining retirement too. And I can tell you there's nothing more meaningful, fulfilling, and impactful in your life and beyond than a life well lived. You know?
beautiful. And kind of our last section was just to once again just close out with, you know, saying that successful retirement is not just a money question, and it's not just a lifestyle question. It's not an either or proposition. It's a both.
Yeah, and I think we want to say that in a good way, that hey, remember, it's not the financial plan. It's not just the clarity around goals and vision and mission. It's making sure they're both coordinated, right? I mean, I almost see these things linking up.
Yeah.
And remember, I believe that's going to, after the talk we had today, I believe that's going to resonate. But also, I think the last takeaway is one more time is that this is your life by design. This is your retirement by design. And it's ultimately up to you. You know, I hope this has been helpful, kind of thing.
And in a way, and it starts today. Don't wait to
right.
implement this.
And there's no ideal time a week from now, a year from now, 5 years from now. Your retirement by design needs to start today. Or your life by design needs to start today. And what we're really doing there is we're teasing that next talk when we start using the language life by design.
We're kind of wrapping it up with a bow on this one and creating readiness for the next topic. And there's even a quote, I don't know if you like this quote, but I think it's the quote says something to the effect of the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago and the second best time is today.
Today, yeah, I think it's a Chinese proverb or something I've seen or something. Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think that does remember, retirement by design is really a life by design. Yes. And then, and the best day to start is right now, you know, kind of thing. Yeah. I think it's up to you. I think we want to drive home. It's up to you. And the best day is to start now.
Yes. Completely. I love it.
Very cool. Exciting. So what's our next step?
So next step is, probably will take 5 to 7 days to have a professional transcript of our call today. I would love if you could just look it over and just see if you're happy with everything that we've collected, or if there's anything you're like, oh, I want to just bring out that story or make a different point somewhere. Just that you sign off that transcript, and once you sign it off, then we start the actual speech writing process.
Okay, nice.
And that normally takes around 6 weeks, give or take, for us to present you with the first draft. And then we move through 2 editing phases as the 3 of us, the speechwriter, you, myself, to tailor it to you and make sure everything fits.
Okay. And the only thing I see is there's still room for like say we're talking about depression, or is there still room for us to insert stats and things? I still haven't done everything I can do.
So the stats, I have them here.
Okay. Perfect.
So these I don't need you to say because I'll pass these on as is to the speechwriter because I already curated them.
So we can just insert them where they fit.
We're gonna specifically the stats that we're looking for here are the stats about, you know, some of the stress related illnesses and depression and suicide rates and that. So
divorce maybe.
Yeah, and divorce. So unless there are any other stats than the ones that that are on your sheet, that they're on the 4th page.
Okay.
Unless
oh, there they are. There they are. Yeah, I didn't go all the way down.
Yeah. So unless there are any other stats, these are the ones I will pass over to the speechwriter. Unless there's anything else, feel free to add that into the transcript once I send that over.
Yeah. I think we're good. I think it'll show up and we're like, oh, we really need something right there. But I think this will give us a real good.
Yeah. So this anyway, you don't need to say that out loud. I just pass that on alongside this anyway, this overall document plus the transcript, so they have the big picture of everything. So so my next step is I'll be in your inbox with the transcript. As soon as you can, you sign that off for me, and then I'll get together with my speechwriter, brief them, they get the transcript, and then they get to work.
Perfect. And we don't need to get back on the calendar until I get that back to you, right?
Correct. So our next call will be once you've received the first draft and looked at it, and then we hop on 2 editing calls where the 3 of us are going to review line by line everything to make sure it suits you, and then we have another like first call and then second call to do the remaining tiny adjustments just to make sure you're comfortable literally with every sentence.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to take it to the next level, and I'll be in your inbox with that transcript very soon.
Thanks, Elena.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Speak soon.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.